The air is thin tonight, like the world's holding its breath. Some faces you pass are just faces, until something in you goes quiet and says, "Don't look too close." Welcome to Midnight Reddit. True stories that don't sleep. Turn down the lights, hit subscribe if you love scary stories, and share your own in the comments. I went to a small gun shop run out of a guy's house in the middle of nowhere. The owner was polite and helpful, but standing in front of him felt like looking at a photograph, or CGI. He didn't seem real. When we got back to the car, my buddy said, "That guy was nice, but he gave me the creeps." Maybe he was a reptilian. We joke about that kind of thing, but neither of us could shake the feeling that something was off, even though nothing unusual happened. One night in Burlington, Vermont, I sat on Church Street waiting for my cousins to come out of Dunkin'. A totally average guy walked by, brown coat, black backpack, shoulder-length hair. He turned his head and locked eyes with me, and my whole body froze. I stood up and began crossing the street, following him without deciding to. He cut into an alley and turned to look at me again. I would have kept going if my cousins hadn't come out and called my name. It broke whatever that was. He hurried away and I was left with one thought I can't explain. Vampire. I don't want logical answers. It was bizarre, and my life is otherwise boring. One of my best friends grew up in an abusive home, but she's the kindest, most selfless person I know. So good it's almost unbelievable. I think she's some kind of angel, maybe her sibling's guardian. She refuses to move out because she won't leave them. She's told me she sometimes feels like she's from a higher plane and gets homesick for it. I believe her. I'm a sensitive, intuitive, good at reading lies, tuned to energy. My partner and I stopped at a 7-Eleven on a cloudy, rainy day. A guy walked in ahead of me, 50s, dark, leathery skin, long gray hair, rectangular sunglasses despite the weather. The air felt still around him, like a vibrational silence. The thought hit me, non-human, like the appearance was an illusion. The second I thought it, he whipped his head back and stared at me, as if daring me to acknowledge it. Behind the glasses, I swear there was no white in his eyes, just brown or black. Inside the store, wherever I moved, I could feel him watching. Not leering, not creepy in that way, more like he was testing if I could feel it. At the car afterward, my partner, unprompted, said the guy felt wrong, like an alien, and that everything around him had gone oddly quiet. I was walking home around 2:30 a.m., headphones on. The street was empty. I stopped at a crosswalk for no reason, and suddenly felt the urge to look behind me. 6 feet away, half hidden in waist-high bushes, stood an extremely pale girl with huge frizzy red hair, staring straight into my eyes. I took off my headphones, sure she was about to speak. She didn't move. She didn't even seem to breathe. My gut told me to keep walking. I crossed, looked back 10 seconds later. She was still in the bushes, still watching. Clean clothes, maintained hair, totally out of place. Not homeless, not high. I don't know if she was really there, but something in me was certain she wasn't human, and that talking to her would have been a mistake. At 18, I was at a concert downtown and ran back to the car to find my ID. When I turned around, an older man was behind me, looked homeless. I should have been nervous, but I felt calm. He smiled and asked if I was being careful. I said yes. Then he said, "Stay safe. The world needs you. You're going to change things." I turned for a second to close my door, looked back, and he was gone. Open, well-lit parking lot, nowhere to disappear to. I still think of him as a guardian angel who stopped by. There was a guy from my high school who felt wrong in a way I can't explain. His body was human, his family seemed normal, but he had this aura, pulling attention, making people like him, especially girls, even though he was unkind and not attractive. His gaze made my skin crawl. His eyes always looked faintly red. I didn't even believe in anything paranormal, but I'm certain he was an incubus. My manager once told me she sat at a red light in the early hours. No one was around. She glanced left, and suddenly a man in a long fur coat was standing there. He was magnetic, too attractive, but wrong. He held her gaze with a blank expression, then suddenly sprinted straight at her car. She gunned it and didn't look back. She ended the story with, "So clearly that man was the devil, and I can't argue." I have a very calm husky, friendly, never afraid. One afternoon, we walked past an old lady in huge sunglasses, sun hat, long sleeves. My dog started whimpering and trying to pull me away. I kept walking, telling her not to be silly, but she escalated, snarling, growling, desperate to rush me past the woman. I said hello. The woman smiled. Something about her felt off, and I couldn't place it. My dog has never acted like that before or since. A friend swears the woman was an alien. I don't know. If I ever see her again, I'm letting my dog decide. An Uber driver once gave me the creeps. I'm a big guy, lift, train, MMA, so I don't spook easily. He spoke in a flat, clinical way about normal things, and everything in me went on alert. Maybe I was drunk and he was just depressed, but the primal part of me said, "Stay calm, don't show fear." Years ago, working as an entertainer in Williams Lake, BC, I met someone I'm certain was a fallen angel. He was impossibly beautiful, like a Botticelli figure. When I sat with him, I went ice cold and felt energy pulling out of my solar plexus. His eyes were stunning and completely empty. He asked, "What do you think of me?" I said, shaking, "You terrify me. You feel cold and I don't see a soul. I'm not sure you're human." He kept staring and said, "I am trying to learn to be human." Then something changed, and suddenly I was seeing through someone else's eyes. His, watching a pair of hands choke people, faces changing one after another. When it ended, he knew I'd seen it. I got up and said, "I can't help you with that." He came back a few times after, just to watch me perform. I pretended not to see him. After a gathering in Arizona, I rode a bus with my dog and some others, including a man whose eyes were entirely brown, no white at all. My dog stared and growled. She'd only ever done that once before, at a huge man in a fur coat. When he spoke kindly to her, she wagged and licked his hand. This time, the brown-eyed man spoke softly and held out his hand. She shrank back and kept growling. A friend of mine met a man online and fell immediately, intensely in love. When I met him, he looked sick even though he acted fine. His skin looked wrong, like two layers that didn't align. He smoked and drank heavily. She moved him in quickly and said she couldn't get close enough to him, like an addiction. He stopped working, watched disturbing porn, and still she felt she couldn't live without him. Then he left her for someone else. The whole thing felt like an incubus story I never wanted to be near again. I used to work hospital supply and got off after 11 p.m. The parking garage entrance was a long, slanted hallway with windows on both sides. I was on my phone, looked up, and saw an overweight man in scrub pants and no shirt walking toward me. His face was empty and distant, eyes focused on something past me. He walked strangely, like a step, then a delayed step. As he passed, his arm slid out and lightly brushed my shoulder, then stayed extended for a beat as he kept moving. He never looked at me. I hurried to my car, shaken in a way I still can't put words to. Walking in Chicago in summer, I passed two very tall people, a man and a woman, who instantly triggered a deep sense of danger. Their skin tone was a perfect, luminous tan, eyes golden brown that seemed to glow, hair in long, lush braids with blonde woven in. They looked like twins, moving in an odd, synchronized stride. They were breathtaking, but every part of me said, "Get away." I crossed the street and tried to keep them in sight, but they were too fast. At Shake Shack, a stranger handed me a coupon I didn't need and said, "Good luck." I asked myself why he'd say that. It felt like he knew I'd just seen something I shouldn't have. I was a leasing agent, struggling in my marriage and tempted to cheat. I'd been praying for clarity, A tall, dark-haired man with striking blue eyes came to see an apartment. As we drove the golf cart, he glanced at my ring and asked how I knew I'd married the right person. I gave a careful answer, and he gently said it's best to stay the course, that if you cheat on your spouse, you cheat on your own heart and you'll regret it. It was like a message placed exactly in front of me. He never came back, his phone disconnected. I stayed faithful and later divorced for other reasons. I never saw him again, but I've always wondered what he really was. In a lower-income town, I lived near a house with a hose hanging out a window sometimes. One afternoon, I walked past and saw a man looking out. I was only a few steps away. His gaze was empty, animal-like, his skin pale and abandoned. The place felt otherworldly. I was too young to understand, but later I knew he was an addict, probably cooking his own drugs. It still haunts me how wrong his face looked. My brother Levi and his friend DJ were walking into a Kroger when DJ stopped and said, "Bro, that's a witch," nodding toward an old woman in the doorway, flapping her hands above her head and mumbling. She snapped her head toward them, ran up and fluttered her hands over their bodies while muttering. It happened fast and they couldn't make out the words. Maybe just a local tweaker convinced she had powers. But you had to be there. I was walking down a cobbled street at night, Edwardian houses on one side, railway on the other, when I passed a house with a woman on the doorstep and a little girl skipping in the garden. Nothing felt creepy at first. Then it hit me why it was strange. It was about 10 p.m. Neither of them looked up as I passed on a quiet road. Both wore long, high-necked Victorian-style nightgowns, and the house was boarded up. Ghosts or squatters with very specific taste? I still don't know. Two fire protection techs I met, call them Tony and John, inspect lots of buildings. One site had a dark, empty warehouse. They never saw anything there until one morning an elevator came up from the basement. The doors opened at the first floor and a secretary-looking woman in a conservative outfit stood there and said, "Going up." They let her go first because they were headed down. The doors closed, the elevator started up, and then immediately came back down and opened. She was gone. Security checked logs. No one else had badged in and combed the building and cameras. No sign of her anywhere. My uncle was driving through Mississippi at night when he got a flat and realized he'd loaned out his jack. A few minutes later, an older man in a rickety truck pulled up and helped him swap the tire. My uncle tried to pay or buy him pie and coffee, but the man refused and told him to go do some good in the world. He climbed into his truck, started the engine, and the truck vanished. Clear night, bright moon, nowhere to hide. My uncle isn't the type to dramatize, but that one shook him. He says it's the only ghost he's ever seen. The night winds are thinning out, and the last footsteps fade into the dark. What about you? Have you ever met someone who felt not quite human? Or had a stranger appear just long enough to change your path? Midnight fades, but the stories don't. See you next time on Midnight Reddit.